Have you ever wondered who you really are? If all the masks fell away, who would remain? And what if what you call I is nothing more than a reflection of what others expect from you? Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." But are we truly ready for this awakening? From the moment we are born, we are bombarded with expectations. Our family, culture, and society, all of them shape us, telling us who we should be. We grow up believing we are a fixed identity. But deep down, there is something unsettling, a lingering sense that we don't fully know ourselves. Why is it that, at times, we even feel like strangers to ourselves? Psychology shows us that we are not just a single self, but multiple selves coexisting, often in conflict. There are parts of our personality that we hide, that we repress, and they tend to surface in the most unexpected moments. Have you ever said or done something and then wondered, "Why did I do that?" As if someone else inside you had taken control for a moment. This happens because within us, there are forces we don't always understand. Archetypes, shadows, unconscious patterns that we inherit and develop throughout life. In this video, we will explore the psychology of self-knowledge through Jung's perspective. We'll understand why knowing ourselves is so difficult, how our psyche is structured, and most importantly, how we can turn this knowledge into something practical and powerful for our lives. But before we dive into this journey, a word of caution. Knowing yourself is not comfortable. You may come across aspects of yourself that you'd rather ignore. But if you have the courage to move forward, the reward is the freedom to be who you truly are. Shall we begin? If there is one truly challenging journey, it is the journey within. Knowing yourself seems like a simple concept. After all, who else could know who we are better than ourselves? But in reality, this quest is full of traps. From an early age, we learn to interpret the world through the eyes of others. Our identity is shaped by culture, family, and social expectations. We grow up being told who we should be, how we should behave, and what we should desire. In the midst of this whirlwind of external influences, where exactly does our true self begin? Carl Jung warned us about a phenomenon called the persona, the mask we wear to adapt to the world. The persona is not a lie, but an edited version of ourselves, a social identity constructed to meet the demands of our environment. The problem is that, all too often, we confuse ourselves with this mask. We spend so much time playing a role that we end up identifying with it, forgetting that we are much more than what we show the world. And when life forces us to face our contradictions, when failure, crisis, or major change make us question everything, the mask begins to crack. What we find behind it can be frightening. Beyond the persona, there's another major obstacle on the path to self-knowledge: the shadow. The shadow is everything we repress, everything we refuse to accept about ourselves. It includes impulses, desires, and emotions that we deem inappropriate or unacceptable. Jung said that the more we deny the shadow, the more power it gains over us. It manifests in the most unexpected moments, in an outburst of anger, in self-destructive behavior, in repetitive patterns we can't seem to break. Often, what we judge in others is exactly what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. Have you ever noticed how certain people's behaviors irritate you in an almost irrational way? That may be a sign that you are projecting your own shadow onto them. Self-knowledge also collides with another crucial factor: fear. Knowing yourself requires courage because it means letting go of comforting illusions. Many people prefer to live within convenient narratives rather than face the truth about themselves. It is easier to believe we are victims of fate than to admit that we sabotage our own choices. It is more comfortable to say that things are just the way they are than to ask why we feel lost or dissatisfied. The mind creates defenses to avoid this confrontation. We make excuses, rationalize behaviors, and convince ourselves that we already know enough about who we are. But do we really? Another element that complicates this journey is the complexity of the human psyche. We are not a unified, cohesive being, but a mosaic of different parts that do not always agree with each other. At one moment, we crave security. At another, we long for adventure. We want to be accepted, yet we also yearn to be authentic. This internal contradiction is inevitable, and trying to ignore it only distances us further from who we truly are. The problem is that society teaches us that we must choose a single path, a fixed identity. But the truth is, we are always changing, always becoming something new. The philosopher Socrates once said, "Know thyself." But what he didn't mention is that this knowledge is never static. There is no final point, no definitive answer to who we are. Self-knowledge is not a destination, but an ongoing process. Every experience, every mistake, every new perspective reveals a little more about ourselves. And paradoxically, the more we know ourselves, the more we realize how much there is still left to discover. Ultimately, the greatest challenge in knowing oneself is not the lack of answers, but the resistance to asking the right questions. Are we willing to look within, even if what we find isn't pleasant? Are we ready to question the stories we tell ourselves? To know oneself is an act of courage, a dive into the unknown. And perhaps that is precisely what makes this journey so fascinating. If knowing oneself is a labyrinth, Jung gave us a map. His model of psychological types not only helps us understand how we think, feel, and perceive the world, but also explains why we so often feel disconnected from ourselves. He discovered that human consciousness operates through four main functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Additionally, each individual has a predominant attitude, which can be either extroverted or introverted. This combination profoundly shapes our personality and determines how we interact with the world. People whose dominant function is thinking tend to analyze reality in a logical, structured, and objective way. They seek coherence and rationality, often prioritizing truth over emotions. On the other hand, those who are guided by feeling evaluate the world based on subjective values, considering the emotional impact of their decisions. For them, what is right or wrong is more connected to harmony and human relationships than to cold logic. Neither approach is inherently better or worse, but depending on how we were raised and the environment we live in, we may end up repressing one in favor of the other. How many times have we heard that one shouldn't be so rational, or that you need to stop being so emotional? The sensation function is linked to the here and now, to concrete experience and the details of the physical world. A dominant sensation function makes a person practical, realistic, and focused on what can be verified through the senses. Intuition, on the other hand, is oriented toward the invisible, picking up on possibilities, patterns, and subtle connections. Intuitive people see beyond the obvious, anticipate trends, and sense what is coming before any concrete evidence appears. And this is where Jung's model stands out. In addition to these four functions, each individual also develops a predominant attitude. Extroverts direct their energy outward, seeking stimulation, interactions, and recognition. Introverts, on the other hand, turn inward, prioritizing their internal world of ideas, reflections, and emotions. This explains why some people recharge their energy at parties and social events, while others feel drained after long interactions and need moments of solitude to recover. The key to self-knowledge lies in recognizing which of these functions dominates our psyche and which have been left aside. Jung said that our weakest function remains in the unconscious, influencing us indirectly and often sabotaging our efforts. For example, someone who is extremely rational may ignore their emotions until they explode uncontrollably. An intuitive person may neglect the practical aspects of life and get lost in a world of ideas without ever putting them into action. The most interesting thing is that as we mature, we are called to integrate our less developed functions. The problem is that achieving balance is not automatic. It requires effort, confrontation, and often crises. People who remain stuck in only one function can become rigid and predictable. The extreme thinker may become cold and insensitive. The sentimentalist may get lost in a sea of emotions without direction. The censor may limit themselves to the immediate, failing to see the bigger picture. The intuitive may lose touch with concrete reality. Jung also introduced an essential concept, the inferior function, the one we repress and that, paradoxically, holds the secret to our wholeness. This inferior function often emerges in moments of stress, revealing a side of ourselves we do not like to admit. The rational person may suddenly be overtaken by an irrational emotional outburst. The sentimental person may explode with surprising coldness. These reactions are not signs of failure, but indications that our psyche is seeking balance. The inferior function is not a flaw to be corrected, but a path to growth. And this is where the real challenge begins, accepting this part of ourselves. Self-knowledge is not about reinforcing what we already know about ourselves, but about opening up to what we ignore or fear. When we understand our psychological types, we gain a new perspective on our behaviors and difficulties. We begin to see our choices with greater clarity, and above all, learn to respect the unique way each person experiences the world. Jung did not create this model to box us into labels, but to help us understand the psyche's dynamism. He did not see psychological types as fixed categories, but as forces that need to be harmonized throughout life. When we stop resisting what is within us and start integrating the different aspects of our personality, the feeling is not one of limitation, but of freedom. And that is where true transformation begins. If there is one thing Jung taught us, it is that no one is born complete. We spend our lives trying to become whole, integrating parts of ourselves that we ignore, repress, or project onto others. This process, which he called individuation, is not a philosophical luxury, but a deep psychological necessity. It is what separates an authentic existence from a life lived on autopilot, but this path is not easy. It requires us to confront not only who we think we are, but also everything we have denied in ourselves. From childhood, we learn to behave according to the expectations of the world around us. To be accepted, we develop a social identity, our persona. If we grow up in an environment that values intelligence, we strive to appear intelligent. If strength is the priority, we hide our vulnerability. If pleasing others is what matters most, we become experts at adaptation. The problem is that, at its core, the persona is a mask. It can be useful and necessary, but it never represents all that we are. And the more we identify with this edited version of ourselves, the further we drift from our true nature. On the other side of the persona lies what we try to hide, our shadow. The shadow consists of everything we have learned to reject, not because it is inherently bad, but because it did not fit the rules of our environment. It may contain repressed anger, unacceptable desires, talents we never explored, or even positive traits we were taught to despise. But the shadow does not disappear. If we do not face it, it manifests indirectly, making us act in ways we do not even understand. That comment that slips out and hurts someone, that self-destructive impulse that comes out of nowhere, these may all be the shadow trying to surface. Individuation begins when we stop running from our shadow and start integrating it. This does not mean giving in to our impulses, but recognizing that they exist and understanding why they are there. Jung said that the goal of life is not perfection, but wholeness. And to be whole, we must accept even the parts of ourselves we do not like. This is why the journey is so difficult. It forces us to look at what we avoid. Beyond the persona and the shadow, Jung identified other forces that shape our psyche. Among them are the archetypes of the animus and the anima, which represent the masculine principle within women and the feminine principle within men. This is not about gender, but about opposing forces within each of us. The animus may appear as an inner voice demanding logic and control, while the anima manifests as a flow of emotions and intuition. Often our relationship with these energies profoundly influences our choices, especially in relationships. When we project our animus or anima onto another person, we expect them to fill a void within us. But no one can complete us. We can only find that wholeness within ourselves. And so we arrive at the central archetype of the psyche, the self. The self is what exists beyond the ego, the deepest part of our identity, which includes both light and shadow. Unlike the persona, which is constructed for the external world, the self is who we truly are. And the paradox is that, although it is our most authentic state, we often go through our entire lives without accessing it. The journey of individuation is, at its core, a call to reconnect. But the path is not linear. Often it presents itself as crises, moments when life forces us to change. Losing a job, the end of a relationship, and existential doubt. All these experiences can be signs that something within us needs to be redefined. And when we try to resist, the suffering intensifies. As Jung said, what you resist persists. The only way out is to face it. This path is not comfortable, but it brings rewards. The more we know ourselves, the more freedom we have to be who we truly are. We stop living to please others, seeking constant external validation, and repeating destructive patterns without understanding why. Individuation is not about becoming someone different, but about remembering who we have always been before the world shaped us. And perhaps this is the most liberating part, realizing that all the answers already exist within us. The problem was never a lack of knowledge, but our resistance to seeing what is already there. The question is, are we ready to look? Knowing who you are is not an end in itself, but a starting point. Self-knowledge is not just about satisfying intellectual curiosity. It has a real impact on how we make decisions, handle challenges, and relate to others. But there is a problem. Many people believe that simply understanding their patterns and motivations is enough to change. However, awareness alone changes nothing. Real transformation requires action. The first barrier to transforming life through self-knowledge is resistance. The ego hates change. Even when we know we are trapped in destructive cycles, there is an unconscious fear of what might happen if we break free. After all, our limitations are also comfortable. They are familiar, predictable. Familiar suffering, no matter how painful, often feels safer than the uncertainty of the new. How many times do we say we want to change? Yet deep down, we keep repeating the same behaviors. This happens because every transformation comes with a price, and for many the cost of change seems greater than the cost of staying the same. Jung once said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This means that wanting to become a better version of yourself is not enough. You must confront the parts of yourself that sabotage your own growth. If you constantly find yourself stuck in the same problems, ask yourself, what part of me benefits from this? It may seem absurd, but often our pain carries hidden gains. Victimhood, for example, can serve as an excuse to avoid responsibility. The fear of rejection can justify inaction. Perfectionism can be a shield against failure. These dynamics remain invisible unless we actively examine them, but once they become conscious, they lose their power over us. But awareness alone is still not enough. The next step is experimentation. True self-knowledge comes from practice. If you want to understand who you really are, observe how you act when no one is watching. Your reactions, your automatic impulses, the moments when you feel discomfort. All of these reveal truths that your rational mind cannot access on its own. When you feel irritated by someone, ask yourself, is this person reflecting something I refuse to accept in myself? When you feel anxious, try to identify whether this anxiety is a real signal or just a lingering effect of old beliefs that no longer make sense. Additionally, it is essential to let go of the illusion that there is a final version of yourself. Many people pursue self-knowledge as if it were a destination, a point where everything will suddenly become clear and problems will disappear. But the truth is, we are in a constant state of transformation. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago. And 5 years from now, you will have changed again. This means that self-knowledge is not a final achievement, but an ongoing commitment. The more we accept this, the less we feel trapped by the need for absolute answers. Another crucial issue is the danger of living only in the mind. Some people become so immersed in the pursuit of self-understanding that they disconnect from real experience. They read, study, analyze their emotions, but they do not live. The true test of self-knowledge is in daily practice. It reveals itself in how we handle challenges, how we treat others, and how authentic we can be under pressure. And finally, there is a fundamental point. No process of self-knowledge is complete without concrete action in the world. What good is understanding your fears if you keep hiding? What good is recognizing your patterns if you never challenge them? Transformation requires risk. At some point, you must step beyond theory and act. This might mean setting a boundary, letting go of an identity that no longer makes sense, or opening yourself up to something completely new. Whatever the case, true change happens the moment you choose to live differently. Self-knowledge does not guarantee a life without suffering, but it gives us something even more valuable, the ability to consciously choose who we want to be. And in the end, that is the only freedom that truly matters. The journey of self-discovery has no final destination. It is not a straight road with a clear endpoint, but a continuous cycle of discoveries, challenges, and transformations. Throughout this video, we explored why it is so difficult to truly know ourselves, the psychological mechanisms that shape us, and how we can use this knowledge to live more authentically. But in the end, it all comes down to one question. Are you willing to look within? Many people spend their lives running from themselves. They avoid silence, distract themselves with exhausting routines, and hide behind relationships, work, or entertainment. They do everything they can to avoid facing their own shadow because they know, perhaps unconsciously, that real change doesn't happen without discomfort. Self-knowledge does not guarantee happiness, but it offers something far more powerful: the freedom to be who you truly are. Jung once said, "To be normal is the ideal aim of the unsuccessful," because being normal means fitting into an externally imposed mold, while being whole means accepting yourself completely, with strengths, flaws, contradictions, and everything else that makes you a unique human being. The world pressures us to conform, to act as if we have all the answers to hide our uncertainties, but the truth is, no one really knows what they are doing. We are all discovering, making mistakes, and learning. And the greatest courage is not in appearing strong, but in admitting that we are all works in progress. If you have made it this far, it means that, in some way, this journey is already a part of your life, and that, in itself, is a big step. Many never even begin. If something we discussed today resonated with you, if an idea made you reflect, then this video has already served its purpose. But knowledge alone is not enough. The question now is, what will you do with it? Thank you so much for being here, for dedicating your time to this conversation. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, not because the algorithm likes it, but because it helps me know that this type of content matters to you. And if you want to continue this journey with me, subscribe to the channel. By the way, since we're talking about self-discovery, there's another video on the screen right now that might interest you, but I won't tell you what it's about. If you truly want to know more, click and find out. See you there.